Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind. Remember that old TV show? Well, maybe I shouldn't reference that TV show considering the host ended up, let's just say, being exposed as a horrible human being. You know, Bill. But I'm sure you guys remember the TV show Kids Say the Darndest Things? Well, there's a new one. It's called Woke Journalists Say the Dumbest Shit. I seriously don't get what the point of these people is anymore. You know, I don't understand how they have jobs. I don't understand how people are able to monetize the work that they do. They're just so incredibly obnoxious and useless and weird, asking the dumbest questions imaginable. You know, the White House press is a great example of that, especially those journalist clowns who get in front of Joe Biden and ask him the dumbest questions you could possibly imagine. There's literally a war going on and Americans are suffering. Joe walks out of an ice cream store and the question that they ask him is, "What flavor of ice cream did you get?"
Mr. President, what did you order?
Chocolate chip.
Mr. President, what is your message?
Or when he walked out of the movie theater after watching Oppenheimer, "Did you enjoy the movie, Mr. President?" So incredibly mind-numbing, so stupid. You know, those are some dumb questions. This one right over here, this one takes the cake. You know, fake news journalists are pretty bad, but pop culture, video game journalists, movie journalists, TV show journalists, these people are the worst. They are the worst breed of journalist. And this moment right here is just the perfect example to make that point. Let me show you guys exactly what's going on. Let's travel into the woke world. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. All right, folks, so probably don't need too much context, or I could probably just fill in the context later. Just take a look at this clip right over here. Here's Nikolai Arcel, who's a filmmaker and an actor by the name of Mads Mikkelsen, being asked a very interesting question about film that they're currently working on.
Hello, I'm from Denmark, and it's a pleasure to be here. So you're a little bit into it. This is a cast and a Danish production, which is entirely Nordic. It therefore has some lack of diversity, you would say, as also new rules are implied in Hollywood.
What are you on to?
Sorry, but
From the get-go.
From the get-go, there is set some rules of diversity across the Atlantic for competing in the best picture, the equivalent to this competition. As I see it, you don't live up to these standards with this broadcast, and there is just curious. It's not because of artistic reasons; it's because of lack of diversity that this can't compete in that competition. Are you worried about that?
Are you?
Me?
I'm serious and honest because you're putting us on the spot. So
Yeah,
you
sure.
answer the question.
No, because I have in comparison Parasite, which is a great
What do
movie.
you think?
I was thinking that Parasite, which is a great movie, coming from South Korea, had the same level of diversity. But coming from South Korea, this was actually still eligible for the competition. You, as a Danish movie with an all-Nordic cast, is not. And that's what I think is a little bit conundrum here.
I don't understand the question.
Okay.
Well, first of all, the film takes place in Denmark in the 1750s.
Yeah.
We do have a big plot line, you know, about a girl of color who is being subjected to racism.
Okay.
And you know, and which was very rare. Any people of color in Denmark in
Yes.
almost nobody. She was probably at the time the only one in the entire country of Denmark. So it was. I would say that it hasn't been. It wasn't a thought in our mind that I think it would be a little weird. You know, if it's just a historical,
Exactly.
how it was in the
That's,
1750s.
That's also what I was portraying for.
Yeah. Cool.
Can we just cue the facepalm meme? So here we have a Danish filmmaker and a Danish actor working on a Nordic film that takes place in Denmark in the 1750s. Now, I'm not exactly sure what the movie's about. I could not tell you, but I could tell you one thing. That the word diversity, not a thing in 1750s Denmark. I'm assuming the movie is about some sort of relevant historic time period, maybe event. You could probably ask all kinds of different questions, but the question that this journalist led with was honestly not even really a question, but more of a criticism. There are too many white people in your 1750s Denmark movie. What a freaking crackhead. There's really nothing else to say, huh? You know, the question I asked in the intro is, how do these people have a job? How are they generating revenue for a company? That's question number one. Question number two is, how do people like this even exist? It's freaking mind-boggling to me. You know, we're talking about cinematics, we're talking about a movie production, whether it's a movie based in history or just a fantasy movie in general, there's a concept that filmmakers need to understand very well. It's called suspension of disbelief. I guess let's read the definition. Suspension of disbelief is the avoidance, often described as willing, of critical thinking and logic in understanding something that is unreal or impossible in reality, such as something in a work or speculative fiction, in order to believe it for the sake of enjoying its narrative. You know, it's cinema, you gotta add drama, you gotta add some craziness, some action to these movies, even if the movie is telling a story of history. But you gotta do it well, you gotta do it right. If it's too crazy, if it's too excessive, if you're bending physics like it's a freaking Bollywood movie, then it goes from suspending your disbelief to just asking yourself, what the hell am I watching? You know, what the frick is this? And you know, this diversity nonsense in some of these movies makes me react in the exact same way that I do to these ridiculous Bollywood movies with the most insane action scenes you could possibly imagine in film. It immediately takes me out of the experience and kind of ruins the whole thing. The example that I generally go to with stuff like this is the most recent, I think it's called Vikings Valhalla series that they did on Netflix, where they took the King of Norway, a Nordic king, a Viking king of the time, I think over 1,000 years ago, if I remember correctly. I forget his first name, but I think his last name was Sigurdsson, after a quick little Google search. The name was Hakon Sigurdsson. He died in the year 995, and he was the ruler of Norway. Well, that Norwegian king, Viking king, this guy, like I always show you in these videos, we've done this a couple times, was played by a black woman. In Viking Nordic times, in the year 995, Netflix chose a black woman to play the King of Norway. Immediately, no more suspension of disbelief, close the TV, not watching this nonsense, questioning myself, what is this? What am I watching? You know, you have to be an insane person who's 100% bought in, drank the woke Kool-Aid, to not view this as what it is. Absolute sheer insanity. Of course, the wokies are going to make the argument that Mads Mikkelsen and Nikolai Arcel are insensitive or even racist for their reaction, but of course they're not. Their reaction was perfect. They were essentially laughing because the question itself was so freaking ridiculous. You know, the question that I think people ought to ask themselves is, are white people allowed to retain their history? You know, why is it that the Black Panther is allowed to exist? Why is it that we're allowed to make movies relating to Asian history, Japanese history, let's say, whatever history you could possibly imagine, but the moment we go to white history movies or white stories, they need to be changed. Like Snow White, for instance, The Little Mermaid, the list goes on and on. A lot of these Disney movies are actually animations that are based on old European folklore, but they need to be modernized. Diversity needs to be forced, and that's what it is, right? It's forced diversity. It's a message, a political message, being shoved in your face, with your history and your stories being used as that vessel, and at the same time, your history and your historical stories being rewritten. It's unacceptable, and it would be viewed as unacceptable unless it's being done essentially to white people and their stories. That is obviously a double standard that is obviously wrong, just like it would be wrong if Vanilla Ice was playing Martin Luther King Jr. in a recent Netflix biopic. There would be outrage. You know, people on Twitter say, oh, why you mad? Why you mad? It's not a big deal. But could you imagine those same soy boys, what their reaction would be if Vanilla Ice was playing Martin Luther King Jr. in a historical film relating to the story and the events of the civil rights movement? Obviously, it would be an outrage, and obviously, even as a white person, I think that that would be ridiculous. I wouldn't support that. We're living in such incredibly weird and stupid times, and I simply don't get how people have fallen for the brainwash. They've joined the cult without question. They have totally devoted themselves to the woke stances, the new woke standards, and they unironically show up to these events as journalists representing some sort of outlet or publication, asking a question like this without feeling shame. I mean, if I was there and I asked a question like that, I don't think I'd be able to show my face in public for a very long time. Ah, the woke clown world, such an interesting phenomenon, isn't it? I guess the only thing to say is, welcome to Idiocracy 2023. This has to be one of the dumbest questions ever asked by a journalist in the history of journalism. Anyways, that's what I got for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe to the channel. You know that we'd love to have you here. Thanks for watching, folks, and I'll see you on the next one.